I'm really excited to introduce you to Stephanie Simpson, who is the communications manager for Restore, where she focuses on external communications, anti-trafficking training, and community mobilization. She joined Restore in 2019 as the manager of job development, and in her current, where she partnered with survivors of trafficking as they pursued safe, meaningful, and sustainable work with local business partners. In her anti-trafficking career, Stephanie has partnered with the Department of Justice, President Biden's interagency task force to monitor and combat trafficking in persons, and dozens of businesses, community centers, and nonprofits across the US in the fight to end human trafficking. Stephanie has a passion for engaging people in different industries to use their circles of influence for change. So welcome, Stephanie. Stephanie's going to be joined in conversation with our own amazing Mariella Marie. She is a Renaissance woman and social impact multimedia producer who has spent a decade working with diverse technologists, independent artists, and divergent innovators across the globe to deepen their audience's emotional intelligence. She has shared the virtual stage with disruptive leaders such as Deepak Chopra, Ra Goddess, and Catherine Zaleski, among many, many more. Mariella curates meaningful conversations and installations centered around belonging, amplifies underserved and underheard voices, and develops provocative initiatives that bridge our shared stories and connect us to an enlightened state of awareness. So welcome to Stephanie and Mariella. I cannot wait to hear this next session, so I will turn the stage over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Power to Fly. And thank you, Stephanie, for joining me for 30 minutes to just drop knowledge. You are totally giving me the Frida Kahlo vibes. And as you heard in my brief bio, I love all things creative, all things, how to channel that creative force that we've got in us. So I love that you're bringing that goddess to us today. So thank you. So Meg gave a great introduction, but I'd love for you to just take us through a little bit more of your career journey. We'd love to learn more about you and specifically what motivated you to start a career in anti-trafficking.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, for having Restore be a part of this conversation. You know, I am just absolutely floored by the intentionality that the Power to Fly team has had with this entire conference. You know, we really do believe that the anti-trafficking field requires all of us linking arms and really specializing in the things that we're excellent at already in our different industries in order to come together to end this evil. So just thank you so much for shedding light on how technology is so important in this space. Yeah, just could not be happier to be here. A little bit about myself and how I came to the anti-trafficking field. I am, you know, I was born in the US and also I'm a very fast talker. That should be listed #1 in my bio. Mariella, full permission to call me out. Please let me know if I'm going way too fast. But I was born in the US, but I was actually raised in El Salvador. My mother is from El Salvador. My father is Dominican. And I was there for the first 13 years of my life. And I think, you know, with being a daughter of immigrants and experiencing life in El Salvador, I really have always had a passion for advocating and for advancing economic opportunities for immigrant women specifically. I didn't see how this so clearly overlapped with human trafficking and with anti-trafficking efforts until I learned about Restore NYC. You know, at Restore, they really had a firm understanding and a firm grasp of the economic vulnerabilities that lead to human trafficking and the economic injustice that is human trafficking. And a lot of our efforts, a lot of our work is focused on community mobilization towards providing safe, sustainable work for vulnerable communities, in particular for immigrant women as well. So really, I felt like I found a very just specific space for myself at Restore within that context that I was just absolutely thrilled about. And you know, I do tell folks that although this work is heavy and difficult and operates out of a very in a very difficult space, kind of in that worst parts of humanity, oftentimes we say, there is a lot of joy and hope in this work. So I hope that over the next, few minutes, we can discuss some of that as well, because I really do think that at Restore, we operate out of a space of joy and hope for survivors of trafficking. So that's what most resonated with me when I was first entering this work.
Wow, there's so much to be said about just your perspective. And I applaud you, because there are so many folks who are trying to connect with their purpose and put that into the work that they do, so that, even if it's a super heavy topic, like, what you deal with at work every day, they can still find the joy or the inspiration because they are truly connected with their purpose. So thank you for representing that for us. And hopefully folks who are listening can be inspired by the work that you do. I'd love for you to educate us a little more about what Restore does. And specifically, are you all exclusive to New York City? Because I know that it's Restore New York City. I ask because I'm a woman of the world. I'm currently in Patagonia. So if there is a chance to extend this knowledge, into the world, I would love to support that.
Yes. So Restore NYC, we started in New York, specifically in New York City. And although we do serve survivors all across the US, we connect them to resources, to local nonprofits, to different resources that can better serve them locally. We do operate out of New York City, and our core services are offered here in New York City. Although I will say, if my boss is watching and there's any, expansion plans to Patagonia, I volunteer as tribute to be the first one to go, because that sounds absolutely lovely right now. But at Restore, a little bit about our work. At Restore, our mission is to make freedom real for survivors of trafficking in the US. And we do that through 3 different programs. The first is through housing. So we provide emergency housing and transitional housing for survivors of trafficking. Number 2 is client services. So this is kind of holistic well-being solutions such as case management, counseling, and crisis intervention for survivors. And then the third is economic empowerment. And this is a really unique solution at Restore, and really what I believe is at the core of also dismantling a lot of human trafficking, as I said, being an economic injustice. Through our economic empowerment program, we have job readiness courses, job placement services, where we partner with local businesses that are wanting to hire survivors that perhaps don't have that most extensive resume, or perhaps are in their immigration process themselves as well. And then third, in our economic empowerment program, we have entrepreneurship services. And this I could talk about for any length of time, really. But this is an incredible program where we support survivors of trafficking that are interested in starting their own businesses. We provide them with mentorship, certificate through partnership with NYU, and capital for them to get their businesses kicked off. So I could talk about this for the next 3 hours, but we'll keep it simple and keep it at that. Those are really our 3 main programs at Restore.
So I would love for you to dive deeper. And of course, we are short on time. So I want you to be able to share as much knowledge as you can. But for folks who are interested in learning more, where can they find you? Let's just get that over with, so that we can have folks already going to your socials or going to your website and figuring out how to work with you all.
Yes. So you can find us at restorenyc.org. You can follow us on Instagram, is where we post all the information for any upcoming events. We have an upcoming Economic Empowerment Summit coming up in September, where we're going to be sharing an even deeper dive into how different sectors and different industries can be mobilized into fighting human trafficking from their spaces without having to necessarily, uproot their lives and come work at a nonprofit. How you can utilize the space you're in to be a part of the fight of ending human trafficking. So look us up, Restore NYC, on all socials, and online at our website.
Awesome.
Should we go ahead and get kicked off into what human trafficking is and go right into it?
Absolutely. Let's go for it.
Yes. So, we're going to discuss a little bit about what human trafficking is, just because there are so many different perceptions. We've all watched Taken, there's so many different ideas of what human trafficking can be, that oftentimes I like to just start with making sure that we're all on the same page of what human trafficking means. So US law defines human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel a person into commercial sex or labor against their will. A couple things to note about that. Number one is that that's the US definition for human trafficking, and it's actually a little stricter and is a little more difficult to prove in court than UN standards or other international standards for human trafficking. Number two is this use of coercion. Oftentimes our idea of what human trafficking is in the most extreme ends of the spectrum for sexual violence, physical violence. And although there are cases like that, and we do serve survivors that have, these more extreme cases and more violent cases, what we most often see is folks that are experiencing coercion. So people that have been kept in cycles of exploitation through coercive practices. So we've heard stories of women that are told, we know where your family lives. Let's not make this more difficult than it has to be. Or if you tell anybody what's happening here, we're going to call ICE. We're going to call, different immigration services and get you deported. What are you going to do then? How will you send money back to your family? How are you going to feed your kids? So I think it's important to note that it's oftentimes more difficult to prove in court, and it's more of this gray space where this trafficking is happening, and where we're seeing a lot of that exploitation is through these coercive practices. Globally, there's about 40 million people that are being trafficked at any given point. In the US, there's about 403,000 people that are being trafficked in the United States. But one other thing that, whenever people ask me what is human trafficking, I always like to note that human trafficking is also a $150 billion industry. It's 150 billion with a B. Oftentimes we don't realize this business model that is human trafficking and these illegal profits that it's generating year after year. For more context on that $150 billion number, last year, McDonald's, Disney, and PepsiCo combined did not have a global revenue of $150 billion. So oftentimes we think of trafficking as this very underground, gritty, hidden, these criminals that are kind of scrappy, not knowing what they're doing. But the reality is that human trafficking and traffickers are highly sophisticated business people running a highly sophisticated business model that is wanting to make the most profit in the least amount of time with the least amount of resources. And one thing that traffickers are excellent at is mobilizing different industries. They're using the travel industry, the hospitality industry, all different sectors, definitely technology, in order to run this business model. So we do believe that one of the key solutions in order to end trafficking is to mobilize different communities in the spaces that they're in order to better understand human trafficking and better understand kind of how it's operating and who it's impacting. Which leads me to kind of the next point is I think an even more important question oftentimes than what is human trafficking is who is it impacting? Who is at the core of this injustice and who's kind of at the heart of this injustice? I really do personally believe that if we have a better understanding of the communities that are impacted by human trafficking, we'd be able to take great strides towards ending it. So who is at the core of human trafficking? Who are traffickers targeting more specifically? There's going to be a bunch of numbers coming your way right now, but we have 64% of survivors of trafficking report being homeless or experiencing unstable housing when they were recruited into a trafficking situation. So homeless communities are disproportionately trafficked. We see that 60% of sex trafficked youth have been in foster care at some point in their life. So it's vulnerable youth that are being trafficked. We see that 94% of trafficking victims are women, adult women. We see that 85% of trafficking victims are women of color in the United States. So oftentimes we hear this phrase, human trafficking can happen to anyone. It is a crime that could impact anyone. And that is technically true. At Restore, we've seen women from every nationality, every background, every socioeconomic status. But the reality also is that in the United States, women of color are disproportionately bearing the horrible reality of human trafficking. Human trafficking is operating at this intersection of sexism, racism, and classism. And that's oftentimes what makes it so difficult to dismantle, is because we're not just fighting the injustice of human trafficking, we're fighting injustices in housing and economic opportunities and economic stability, sexism, racism, classism.
It looks like we might have lost Stephanie for just a moment, so give us a second and we'll get her brought back. But Mariella, were there? I know that you usually facilitate questions from the audience. I haven't seen any yet, but are there any things that anything else you want to say to our audience to make them understand that they can really participate here?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for chiming in there, Meg. Hopefully we get Stephanie back here soon. But I just wanted to, I know this is a very intense conversation to have. That's very necessary. But we would love to hear from you if you have any questions. There are no wrong questions. There are no stupid questions, especially with this important topic. So feel free to write your questions or reflections. If you have any sensitive information and you prefer to be held anonymous, you can write to any of our Power to Fly team there in the live chat privately, and they will raise your question and keep you anonymous there. But I just want to make sure that folks who are joining us live know that they have the floor to voice their reflections, questions, and ask, for any necessary resources that come to mind right now. Well, Stephanie was dropping a lot of data right now, so I don't know if I'll be able to follow up with that. Very, very eager to get her back here so she can continue that thread. But yeah, I just want to see if there's anyone now who is joining us live who has any questions here that I can just add to our list. Otherwise, let's see. I guess it's a time to.
We've got her back here.
Oh, good, perfect.
Yep, we're onboarding her right now. So thank you so much for your patience, Mariella.
Awesome. No worries. This is, what they can't stop, won't stop, Stephanie. Sometimes technology tries to keep these really important conversations silenced. I don't know who's pulling the strings back there, but we will not be stopped.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
This is probably my worst nightmare coming true. So
don't worry. I like to extend. This is good live practice. This happens. Yes. We've moved online. We take a deep breath. We know that people want to hear from us.
We keep going.
Yes, we keep it moving. So Stephanie, you were dropping some hardcore data.
Where was I at? What was the last thing you heard? I'm worried it's going to be 10 minutes ago.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Pick up wherever you think we need to start off again with the data. You were speaking just about how women of color the numbers are disproportionate, of course, in the States specifically.
Absolutely. So so even though we like to kind of operate from a space of it can happen to anyone, as we've said, traffickers are running a business model where they're wanting to make the highest amount of profits with the least amount of resources, the least amount of pushback, right? So although it can happen, it's unlikely that traffickers will be targeting, young suburban girls, snatching them from a Target parking lot or something of that sort, because they have communities of support. They have families around them. They have friends. They have communities that are rallying behind them. So we're not seeing this as oftentimes as traffickers recruiting, the runaway foster youth, the homeless woman, people that are already experiencing other layers and other intersecting systems of injustice that are working against them, and that are oftentimes the easiest targets for them to go after.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I really want to make sure that we hit the nail on the head with, speaking specifically about technology, because you did mention there are certain spaces that the folks who are basically, behind the machine of human trafficking are diving into and leveraging. How can we be more aware as, technologists or people that work in tech, consumers of tech as well, how online services are impacting human trafficking?
Absolutely. And this is where the conversation can sometimes take a little bit of a difficult spin, a little bit of a more uncomfortable tone. And I also want to know, I am going to be discussing some very sensitive subjects, including sexual abuse and rape. So I just want everybody that's watching to be mindful in case any feelings or experiences come up with that. But as we kind of make that mental switch of seeing traffickers that are doing evil for the sake of evil. If we switch over to an understanding that traffickers are evil for the sake of profit, then we better understand how this is run and is operated as a business. So when the pandemic swept in, and you and me and a ton of other people and businesses and industries were scraping to figure out how can we continue our work and earning money and generating income online and in a digital space, traffickers did the exact same thing. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a significant decrease in demand for in-person sex services like brothels, illicit massage businesses, and it was now moved to a digital space. So Polaris, who's the #1 data collector for human trafficking in the US, they also run the human trafficking hotline. They have now moved pornography as the top 3 form of sex trafficking in the United States. So we're seeing an increase of sex trafficking through pornography. And this is where it becomes tough, because oftentimes we get asked, tell me, like, what are the kind of dark sides of the web, or like these markets, these underground markets where human trafficking is happening. The reality is that it's happening right in front of us, and it's happening in websites that we've likely accessed before. It's happening right under our noses because, again, it's a $150 billion industry. So with that, it has to be accessible. It has to be easy to reach. It has to be just accessible for people online. So we saw, for example, in June, just a couple weeks ago, that one of the top executives at Girls Do Porn was sentenced to 20 years in jail for sex trafficking. We saw how they were using coercive tactics of, telling girls that there were online modeling opportunities available. And then when they would come in and do their audition, they would coerce into turning it into, oh, it's not a photo, it's actually going to be a video, and it's actually going to be a pornographic video, but we won't be posting it online, we'll be selling it privately. And then we would see that they would sell it to Pornhub, who would then post it online. So we saw a lot of these coercive practices happening in this space. Just last December, Nicholas Kristof, who's a columnist for the New York Times and a dear partner to Restore, he was sharing, he wrote an expose and a column for the New York Times titled Children of Pornhub. And it was really kind of focused on the exploitation and some of the practices and human trafficking that are happening on Pornhub. And for some context here too, Pornhub has more monthly visitors than Netflix, Yahoo, or Amazon. They're considered the 10th most visited website in the world, and they have almost 3 billion ad impressions a day. So they're generating a ton of money. Like, this is not, a local kind of content creator coming up with their own videos, coming up with their own things. This is a multi-billion-dollar company that's generating illegal profits off of videos of kids and women being exploited online. After this expose, we saw that Pornhub removed around 75% of their content from their website. It led to MasterCard and Visa breaking ties with the company. And it led to Pornhub saying that over the next year, they're wanting to implement better consent verification systems and age verification systems. Although I have a quote here from the executive director of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, where she's talking about, we don't know that Pornhub is able to be trusted with this. And we don't know that they're able to self-regulate and hold themselves accountable when for years and years now, they have been knowingly profiting from rape, from the abuse and trafficking of women and vulnerable women on their websites. What we're also seeing an increase of is deceptive job ads online. So a lot of how they're recruiting women for these pornography videos is by posting on Craigslist an ad that'll say, similar to what we heard from the Girls Do Porn case, they'll post an ad online saying, hey, this opportunity, come on in, try out, we'll meet you here. And then once the women arrive, oftentimes they don't have immigration status, so they're not able to access other jobs. They don't have other economic opportunities they're able to access. They don't have perhaps an education, or they're facing other systemic barriers that prohibit them from accessing other services and other economic opportunities. So, again, I always try to say this is, of course, sensitive, because it often feels like an attack on sex positivity. But, I do think that human trafficking is it's just a mixture of so many different injustices, and it operates in the nuance. And I think that, let's just press into that nuance. I don't think the issue at hand here is pornography, but I think the issue at hand here is exploitation. It's trafficking, it's abuse. I think that we can hold both of those tensions of both being sex positive while also recognizing the lack of technology for consent verification, for age verification, that often allows for trafficking situations to happen and allows for people to exploit others that really are just wanting to make ends meet.
So thank you for highlighting that body positivity and sex positivity is actually a healthy thing, and that these folks are taking advantage of that. And of course, there's a bag of tricks as to how they can take advantage of that. So thank you for raising that to our awareness. I do have some private questions here that I'm going to flag to you. We've got about 3 minutes left. So folks, if we don't get to your questions, I really encourage you to connect with Stephanie and reach out to her directly so that she can get your questions answered. So here is a question here. Is there a single public misconception that most hinders your work?
I would say the one that we talked about earlier of human trafficking happening in the very dark web, that we have never seen it. Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry. It's happening everywhere. So whenever, we're accessing a lot of these websites that are known to traffic, it kind of is fueling that machines in a lot of ways. And then the second one would probably be that there has to be physical violence or very inherently violent world. A lot of human trafficking can happen without ever being, without there ever being that clear physical violence, but it being a lot of coercion.
Okay, and this next question, do apps like Trafficking have any actual impact on traffickers or their victims? Are there other options for individuals who want to help your cause?
Yeah, I think the one thing, if in the last minute, if I can, there's a lot to kind of unpack in that first part of the question. The simple answer is that we have met a lot of survivors of trafficking that have told us, my trafficker told me to say that I am doing this willingly, that I am doing this, by choice. So I just want to say that there's so much nuance there. There's so much that requires us leaning in. And whenever folks ask, what is the number one way to help our causes? Get educated, come to our events. We host hour-long conversations, webinars about the intersectionality of trafficking, how race impacts trafficking, how gender impacts trafficking. So please come to those. And number two is hire survivors. When you focus and when you prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in your hiring, you are part of the fight to ending human trafficking. You are creating space and creating economic opportunities for communities that would otherwise be vulnerable.
Beautifully said. And just remind us how we can find you all online, on social medias, and your website.
Yes, please go to restorenyc.org. I will make sure my Wi-Fi is working next time we do one of these webinars. Follow us on Instagram at restorenyc. We post updates, education, statistics, survivor stories. Please come join us in this work. We would love to have you. There's space for every single one of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to drop knowledge with us today. Meg, we're going to pass the mic back to you. And Stephanie, I look forward to staying connected.
Thank you.